Hello, 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 my friends. Welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. I'm so excited you decided to hit play today, hang out with me. We are going to be talking about unexplained infertility today and getting a little bit deeper into the three pieces of the puzzle that I feel are often most overlooked when we're given that tag. Before I roll into our content, though, I'll just give like a quick disclaimer. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it until after I'm done recording. But we have my wonderful in-laws are here building out a sauna in our gym in our basement, which is super exciting. And they're working on it right now. And so there's some banging and nailing and sounds and things that I'm hoping the microphone won't pick up, but it might. And I'll just apologize in advance for that extra sound you might get. We're really excited because, Tyler is Finnish, my partner, and he's very not Finnish in any other way, I don't think, except he loves saunas. And they always had a sauna growing up. So when we built this house, it was something he was so excited to be able to add in. And so it's kind of cool that he's getting to do that. And his parents are building it for us, which is also super nice. It's very beautiful. Come follow me on Instagram. I'll post some pictures later this week when it is all said and done. And maybe we'll talk about how we can use saunas appropriately in the fertility experience. Because I know we talk a lot about heat and not wanting to actually heat our bodies too much especially from a semen perspective, from a sperm perspective. So how do we use those safely? Maybe that will be our next week's episode. Maybe I'll record in the sauna. But today we're going to talk about unexplained infertility, which is something that is becoming more and more and more common, in all honesty. I feel like I'm hearing and seeing the diagnosis a lot more now. I don't know. Is that just because that's who I'm attracting into my world? Is it actually because the rates are increasing? I'm not sure. But what we see from the research is about anywhere from 15 to 30% of couples right now are being diagnosed with unexplained infertility. And what does that mean? It essentially means you've done the, what is it called? I mean, workup, but like I call it the basic workup. You've done the basic workup through your OBGYN, through your fertility clinic, and of that basic workup, everything has come back, quote unquote, fine. And therefore, quote unquote, nothing is wrong. And you are diagnosed with unexplained infertility. We're essentially seeing four things make that decision. Your basic hormone lab workup, doing an ultrasound with an HSG, so a histosalpingogram, to actually make sure your tubes are open. So assessing for ovulation dysfunction. Or I shouldn't say actually, because an HSG doesn't assess for all ovulation dysfunction, but basically making sure your tubes are open, that if you are ovulating, the egg is actually getting there. 3, a semen analysis, so a male fertility workup, and then your health history. So are there any red flags in your health history that would warrant further workup in that basic box, essentially? That's what we're seeing. And what I notice as a practitioner, I hate the term alternative practitioner. I feel like it just discredits me, and not just me, but naturopathic doctors in general, being a part of mainstream medicine, when the reality is we should be, and B, I think what's also becoming more and more clear that it's needed from a whole rounded care perspective, but that's a topic for another time. But what I'm noticing is that we're seeing every clinic practitioner kind of does their own thing. So some lab workups, for example, blood work workups, are fairly thorough, while others, I'm like, is this really all you're basing this diagnosis on? Like, we've barely even scratched the surface. So there comes a time when we need to go deeper, potentially. So before we get into that, first I want to just say, I believe that unexplained infertility is a real diagnosis. I truly do believe that there are likely some people out there where it quite literally makes no sense. Now, I also personally hold the belief that we just aren't able to get those people the answer because we don't have that technology yet. Medicine is always evolving, right? We're always deepening our understanding of how the body works. We can only do so much with the technology that we have. And the fertility field, for example, has come a long, long way in the last even 10 years, I feel, but even more so than that. I remember my mom telling me a story when I first got into really treating infertility and working with fertility couples. And I have a younger brother, but she let me know that after I was born, they really wanted a third baby and they couldn't get pregnant. And at the time, there was just a couple of fertility doctors. And so they were referred to Toronto. We lived in Barrie, so about an hour north. They were referred to Toronto. And I didn't get the full details of like what they uncovered and yada, yada, yada. But the reality was for my parents at that time, it just wasn't feasible financially. The doctor, I'm pretty sure if my memory serves me properly, the doctor recommended doing IVF, and it was, fairly new onto the space. And my parents, that just wasn't an option on their table for them. So long story short, they just assumed that they were done and couldn't have kids anymore. And I have a 20-year-old brother. So we had a very pleasant special surprise in our family where I became a middle child when I was 13. And like, thank goodness they did, because I don't think my brother listens to my podcast, but I love you if you do. So, oh geez, if you're on YouTube, I just punched my microphone and you saw that, because I'm not going to make Tyler cut that out. But the change, that wasn't that long ago. 20 years wasn't that long. I'm not even 20 years. I guess it was more like probably 30 plus years. Things have changed so much. Our ability to do different things has changed so much. And so I do believe there'll come a time where we'll be able to peel back another layer of infertility with just advancements in medicine and technology. So yes, unexplained is a real thing. Yes, I believe that we just probably don't have the technology or the capacity to actually deeply understand that unexplained diagnosis. And maybe one day, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, we'll have a better understanding and there won't actually be as many unexplained cases, depending. But what do we do about right now? So my other belief is that we're giving out that tag, we're giving out that diagnosis and that label far too quickly, because the initial workup in the fertility world is fairly surface level, and that serves most couples, right? Like that serves 70% of the population, where they're like, yep, this is what's going on based on this surface workup, and here are your next logical steps. But it's doing a disservice for the other 30% of couples where that's actually not enough. We're scratching the surface, doesn't quite get them the answers that they're searching for. And if they're not working with a healthcare team that is, being proactive and going deeper, they're now spending perhaps the next 6 months to a year trying different treatments, spending boatloads of money, and not getting pregnant until they go a little bit deeper. So that's not to say it's that simple for everybody. That's not to say if you're someone who's listening and you've been told you have unexplained infertility, that the next 3 things I talk about are, absolutely going to change your life. One thing I will always pride myself on is I'm never going to sit here in front of this microphone, in front of this computer with any of you, with any of my clients, and guarantee you a pregnancy or a baby, or guarantee you, this is exactly the issue, and once we fix it, you're going to be fine. And it breaks my heart when I have clients who are told that by other practitioners, whether it be an alternative practitioner or their OBGYN or their fertility clinic, their RE, saying, just take this and you'll be pregnant in 3 months. Like there's nothing that boils my blood more, because the reality is it's not that friggin' simple. It's just not. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to explain these 3 things, but I'm also going to give you the context that we need to look into this for you. We potentially need to work on things in here for you, but I'm not saying this is, absolutely it for you. Let's just start using our intuition coupled with our, knowledge to decide, is this a road that I'm supposed to walk down? So, unexplained infertility, there's 3 things that if you have this diagnosis, I want you to really start to consider. What are we doing to support your body with these 3 things? First and foremost, actually, before I get into that, there's certain questions that I ask myself when I have a couple come into Fertility Confidence Method that have been told already that they have unexplained infertility. So the first one is what does your workup look like? What have you actually gotten done? Because I've often seen couples come in and say, I've been told I have unexplained infertility, and their doctor's taken like a basic health history and done a couple of labs and maybe a semen analysis, and that's it. And I'm like, well, there's a little bit more here we want to actually look at. So what does your workup actually look like? And are your results optimal, not just normal? And there in and of itself often lies a lot of situations where we can say, you know what? This and this and this actually could be better. And maybe you are someone who needs these numbers to be perfect, not just okay, not just fine. So we're going to start by really working here while we also just go a little bit deeper and make sure we're not missing anything. So a lot of times looking at the results and asking the questions, is this actually optimal, can make a world of difference for you. And then we go into, okay, what have you had done? Are we missing anything? Is this optimal, or is it just fine? Because when we're in the business of making babies, it's not about being fine. It's about being optimal. Best chance possible. That's what we're aiming for. That's why we care if it's optimal versus normal, because normal, unfortunately, is just population average. And if you have been researching fertility, you know that the population average sucks. And it is only going down. So why are we comparing ourselves to awful numbers? We need to be comparing ourselves to numbers that are optimal. And then we need to go deeper. So the first thing we want to look into, we want to talk about, we want to think about, and we want to have on our radar is inflammation. If you listen to the podcast, we talked about this a few episodes ago, about the study that came out with IVF and looking at CRP and low degree inflammation actually influencing clinical pregnancy outcomes. And I'm really hopeful this is going to be the first step in towards many of actually digging deeper on the impact of inflammation in fertility. But we don't run a CRP across the board for women. We don't have a conversation about what low level inflammation can be coming from, can influence your body. We don't even really hear that word all that much. And I think the reality is because we don't have a great way to assess for inflammation. And so it's almost like we just turn a blind eye to these things. But the reality is if you have an unexplained diagnosis, we can't turn a blind eye to things that we don't fully understand. We actually need to step outside of the box a little bit. And that's where our success comes from, is we're willing and able to step outside of the box for our clients who aren't getting that level of care from their current care team. So inflammation might feel like one of these elusive topics in the fertility space, but the reality is it can influence so many aspects of the journey. It can influence our egg quality, sperm quality. It can influence implantation. It can influence the ovulatory journey in general. It can be related to metabolic health and maybe a sign that we need to dig deeper into the metabolic health pieces. It can impact circulation, which we know is so important. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that this can potentially touch on, that we need to be working lowering inflammatory principles into our preconception care. So first and foremost, we can dig deeper with doing like a CRP and a health history. And then we can strategize on how are we best to move forward with you personally to actually combat this. Are you someone where maybe we really need to focus on nutrition, or we really need to focus on lifestyle? Or do we need to do like the full gamut of nutrition, lifestyle, and strategic supplementation? And can we get to the root cause of where this inflammation is coming from? So that really just opens up, again, it's like an onion, opens up more layers of the experience that we potentially need to dig deeper into. So that's number one. Number two is your immune system. And this is one that I have seen time and time again being a recurring issue with clients who aren't getting anywhere with assistive reproductive technology, or they're continuing to get pregnant no problem and have miscarriages. So our recurrent loss population. And it's still something, again, that is not very well understood, definitely not looked at in our basic infertility workup, but I really do believe it's actually a big piece of the puzzle for that population of unexplained infertility, recurrent miscarriage, or like failed IVF implantation. And then usually at that point, especially with failed IVF or multiple miscarriages with IVF, that's when we're often seeing a deeper look into your immune system. But we're doing couples a disservice by not looking into that earlier in the journey. And you know what? We're having a discussion about PGTA testing your embryos in IVF. One of our FCM members brought it up in our community, and one of our other members said, her doctor said there's really no point, that if they weren't normal embryos, she would just miscarry and then they would transfer another. And immediately in my head, I was like, oh my God, that is, if I can't believe that was the recommendation of just like, oh, no, don't worry about it, because if it's not a good embryo, your body will just take care of it. And then another of our FCM members basically said what my brain was saying and was like, think about it this way, that's not feasible for everybody to continue to go through transfers, which is money, and continue to go through losses, which is mental health, and just like to basically do that process multiple times just to get there's a whole kind of can of worms here that I don't really think I need to open right now. But that is similar with the immune piece of things that I'm seeing in the population is we're not open. And I say I mean most mainstream practitioners in the fertility world aren't open to go there because the research is so. And not necessarily the research, but the treatment research is so. And they're more inclined to do, X, Y, Z that they've always done first and then step outside of the box later. But if there are signs in the health history, for example, there's family history of autoimmune disease, there's personal history of autoimmune disease, there's been previous miscarriages before, this is when we actually should probably be doing a full immune workup right away. And you can have unexplained, meaning everything else looks fine, but have an autoimmune issue or immune issue that is keeping you from getting or staying pregnant because we're not looking at that in the basic workup. And I have a good amount of clients over the years who have had recurrent loss, for example, and have greatly benefited from an autoimmune protocol and an immune-focused protocol, which is usually a prednisone coupled with immunoglobulin or IVIG therapy, and all now have babies at home. And so I'm a huge advocate for digging deeper and doing immune protocols in clients who have unexplained recurrent loss, specifically because I've seen it time and time again work really, really beautiful. So that's something we always want to think about. There's an amazing book written by Dr. Alan Beers called Is Your Body Baby Friendly? And if you're someone who has unexplained or recurrent implantation failure or recurrent miscarriage, this can be a really helpful book to help you actually advocate for yourself to do further immune testing. It's definitely not an easy read. I will just make sure everyone understands that. It's very technical, very, very heavy. But it can also be very eye-opening for you to say like, wow, this resonates with me and I need to go deeper into this space. What I'm seeing at least is that here in Canada, we're still pretty like adverse to doing full immune testing, but I have been able to help clients get proper treatment. And I'm seeing, clients in the US have an easier time getting like a natural killer cell workup and things like that, which Dr. Beers talks about in his book. There's always just going to be discrepancies based on where we live, but digging into the immune piece, helping to balance out your Th1, Th2 responses, doing proper autoimmune screening with clients is so incredibly, incredibly important. And I hope that we see more research in this area, specifically in the realm of how we can benefit the immune system with mushrooms, for example. We don't have any research with mushrooms and how they can impact fertility. I would love to see that. Even like probiotics, we have some, but we don't have a lot of great data with probiotics and infertility, and that's something as well I'd love to see more of. So hopefully in the coming years, we get a little bit more research into other options. But for now, we have to just ask the right questions and dig a little bit deeper and understand that you might have to advocate for yourself in this arena a little bit more. And then the last one is quality. And when I say quality, I mean egg quality and sperm quality. We don't have tests for egg quality. We have what I call soft markers, meaning when day 3 FSH is above 10, we are even above 8, actually. We're having that conversation about, this is potentially a sign of egg quality. We don't know for sure. It might be egg quality. What's your estrogen doing? Because it also might be low estrogen, pushing that up. Are you on medication? Because that might be impacting it. There's a few different things we need to look into, but in a vacuum, we can say like elevated FSH might be a sign of egg quality. It might be telling us that your brain is actually needing to yell louder at your ovaries to get them to do their job, to actually mature. But that's kind of it. Like we actually don't have any other tests we can do. There's no special machine. We can like roll over our ovaries every day and get like a little glimpse of what's happening, which is sad. And maybe one day, but I'm sure that special machine would have too much radiation and yada, yada. Cons will outweigh the benefits. The only other way is doing IVF. And even that, we can't get like a 100% accurate look at being able to say like, yes, this is an egg quality issue, because the sperm are still involved, right? And it's the same with sperm. So there's obviously testing, right? We can get a good idea of your count, which tells us nothing about quality. And we can look at your motility and your morphology. But there's more to it. And like earlier when I said, if you're a listener of the podcast before, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, episode 62, where we talked about how a semen analysis isn't actually all the information that you need. That quality, that overall DNA integrity, why am I stumbling on that word? DNA integrity of the sperm is not something that we see in a standard semen analysis, and that the quality of the sperm can still be poor. And then we also have that morphology piece, right? And we're seeing a lot of clinics not really care or run morphology, when the reality is that if morphology is 0 or 1%, the majority of those sperm are abnormal, meaning they're likely not going to properly fertilize that egg, meaning higher rates of miscarriage or no pregnancies at all. So the quality of egg and sperm is important. And in a basic fertility workup, we don't really see those things. We see a number of sperm and how they're swimming, but that's it. We don't see really anything about quality of eggs because, like I said, we don't have tests for that, other than we do get to see where your day 3 FSH is typically. If someone has diagnosed you with unexplained infertility and they have not run your day 3 hormones, run. That at the very least is what should be done in your workup. So we can't ignore this. We can't ignore the fact that we don't actually get to really see this data before you get that diagnosis, that having poor egg and sperm quality is not unexplained. That's very much explained. And so we need to treat these things regardless, and we need to do this properly. And this is really where FCM shines, is that oftentimes if you're like, how do I improve my egg quality? What happens? You go on Google. Hey, Google, how do I improve my egg quality? What's the first thing that comes up? CoQ10. Every time, right? I guarantee you half of you listening are on CoQ10 because the internet told you it was good for your egg quality. And I'm not saying it's not. There is some research in CoQ10 for fertility, but there are other things you need to do. There are other modifiable risk factors that are negatively impacting your egg and sperm quality that you need to manage. And then, truthfully and personally, there are other supplements that are more well-researched for increased clinical pregnancy rates that we can assume are helping with quality in IVF that we can then use based on wherever you're at in your fertility journey. And that's where, working with a practitioner and having that strategic supplementation piece makes such a big difference. So you're not wasting money and you're not wasting time, because we know that it can take, 3, 4, 5 months of working on quality to really make an impactful change. So, to recap, if you've been told you have unexplained infertility, we want to go deeper, okay? First and foremost, have you had a good basic workup done? And second, are your numbers actually optimal, not just normal? And then, what are we doing to support your body in terms of inflammation? What are we doing to support your body in terms of immune health? And what are we doing to support your body and your partner's body in terms of egg quality and sperm quality? We need to dig deeper. If that's the only thing you get out of this episode, I feel like I've accomplished my job for this week. But hopefully that is helpful. Check out those other couple of episodes. Episode 62 was one I mentioned, and then there was another one a few back. What did we talk about where I said we should listen to this one? I can't remember, but listen to them all, my friends. And if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, it'd be incredibly helpful if you did, because that tells the internet that you love this information, and therefore other couples who are in your situation will have an easier time finding this information as well. And I'm going to pop in the show notes, but we're actually running our egg quality masterclass. So if our conversation here about quality has kind of piqued your interest, we're running our live egg quality masterclass on March 14th. Ooh, I hope that's right. I'll put it in the show notes if it's not, but March 14th. So if you're listening to this before March, come and hang out with us over in the egg quality workshop. I'll post the link to register in the show notes, and I will see you guys in the next one.